All
Okay.
right, everybody. Before there were video game studios, game engines that defined industries, there were experiments. One of those experiments became Colossal Cave. And from that spark, Roberta and Ken Williams created Mystery House, one of the first graphical adventure games ever made. Today, we are incredibly fortunate to be joined by the people who helped define that era. Ken and Roberta Williams joining us via Zoom. Go ahead, take it away with the presentation, guys.
All right.
Okay, hi everyone. Thank you, Marcus. I have a long history with Marcus, and we're lucky to have him as our moderator today. And with that, let's roll. Although I got to figure out now, all of a sudden my slides won't change. Of course, there goes. Well, for people that may or may not know us, we did a lot of games, over 250 games back in the old days, and released them in something like 2,500 different formats when you count the languages and various platforms. I mean, this tiny subset of them. So, well, you probably already know who we are, and that's just kind of a silly picture of us. I just thought it was cute, so why not?
Well, it
But
shows how fun we are.
Well, Roberta's fun.
And you have to be fun in order to design computer games, that's for sure.
And the two dogs are Tundra and Keely. And well, let's see, this is kind of a before and after when we first started doing games. And 46 years later, I was going to say nearly 50 years, but that makes us sound too old. So I'll say 46 years of career that spans building games. And yeah, and I date all the way back to 1970. I don't know if it's 74 or 73, but I saw an ad in a magazine that was kind of like, you can be a programmer and earn as much as
It would
eight
have
to
been 73.
73. Yeah, it says you could earn 8 to 10,000 a year, and that sounded pretty darn big at the time. So I signed up, did a trade school, did not really do college,
Well,
and
let me add to that. Yeah, at that time we were like 19 and 20 years old, and we didn't have any money, very little money. And for Ken to go to Control Data Institute, we had to beg my dad to pay for it, which was the best money he ever spent.
that worked. Learned to
Yeah,
program.
yeah.
And I even got a job where I had a teletype. I was working via a teletype using paper tape. And probably since you're at the Vintage Computer Show, there's probably teletypes there that you can see. But yeah, it was the days of an acoustic modem where it sounded like a fax machine. And even all of you may not even remember fax machine. But Roberta can talk. But I brought home this beast to do some programming, and found a text game on it. And Roberta,
Well, the text game that he found was in he was doing contract programming, which means at night, not his normal job. And so he had, using the teletype, he would get into the corporation that he was contracting for and into their mainframe computer. And he was just kind of digging around in there and found a games folder or file, you might say. And one of the games was something called Advent, Advent, which turned out it was short for adventure. And he just kind of clicked on it to see what it was and saw that it was some kind of a story oriented text, obviously text, um, um, as if you were in a story reading it, but you could go through it. And if you typed in one or two commands with the keyboard, you can see there, and then it's just paper. There's no monitor, that it would answer back, and which was so surprising. It was almost like prehistoric AI, and it was awesome. And he played around with it for a bit, and then he came to me. I wasn't working at the time. I just had our second child and was home. And he said, I think you might enjoy this, because he knew I was really into fantasy and reading books. And I started playing it, and it turned out that it was Colossal Cave. But I became obsessed with it obsessed. I mean, literally, I couldn't even sleep at night trying to figure out how to get through this game. And it basically, not to dwell too much on it, but this game is so important to Ken and I, and maybe, to many of you, because it's really what started the whole adventure game genre. It started my career because I needed to have more of them like this, and there wasn't any. So I decided to make my own, and that's when I sat down and designed Mystery House, and that's what inspired me. And that's the beginning of Sierra Online, beginning of my career, really the beginning of Ken's as well to a certain extent. And anyway, that's why this is so important.
Anyway, well, we started doing games. Roberta wanted to do her own game, talked me into doing programming for a game called Mystery House. And you can see the artwork there, which is Roberta did that. And I think Marcus has a Versa writer there. It was a tablet we used to input the graphics. And if any of you want to try, talk to Marcus, but not easy to do graphics. And plus, in 1980, there was nothing. There was no game industry. There was no concept of doing games. There was, kind of, I say, no road tap map. I mean, the good thing, there was no competition. There was, none. I mean, it was just an empty industry, but also there was no tools. When I built Mystery House, there was no compiler. There was no assembler. There was no animation editors. Even writing to the floppy drive, I was having to code in 6502 machine language. And Roberta designed this game and taught me into doing it, but it was a big game and I had a little floppy,
Well, and the other part of it is I conceived it first to be a text game because all I knew at that point, up to that point, was Colossal Cave or Original Adventure. I mean, that's all I knew because that's the only experience I had. And so I just conceived of Mystery House as text. But as Ken and I were talking and working together at the beginning to try to figure this out, one of us said, "Wouldn't it be great if we could have graphics?" And Ken immediately got started trying to figure out how we could do graphics, and this would be on the Apple II, because that's the computer we had, and we had to do it on the computer we owned. And he figured out, and we bought one of the first Versa writers, which is the graphics tablet that I had to use, and I have to just apologize for the graphics on the original Mystery House because I'm not really an artist. But the Versa writer is very difficult to use, very difficult. So trying to get any kind of, nuance and graphics, forget it. That's not going to happen. So I had to say that.
I don't know if you can tell it at your end, but there's purple and green lines occasionally. That was called artifacting, and we wound up taking advantage of that. There was weird stuff on the Apple II where I think it was if the top bit was on, then you got an orange or a blue line. Otherwise, you got a green or purple. But we wound up using that for another game called Wizard and Princess to try to fake colors and actually look kind of cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's see. From when we started Sierra till when we sold the game and retired in 1998, the industry kind of exploded. I mean, the kinds of games we were doing were single player. We were selling them on floppies. We evolved our own tools over the year. I mean, one of Sierra's big competitive advantage was that we had created our own programming language, kind of like Unity or Unreal today.
Mm-hmm.
And we programmed our games in it, all of the games. So we did games in kind of every category that you could imagine. I mean, from that start with Mystery House, We did, well, yeah, as you can see there, kind of every game in every category. Games are sold in boxes back then. In some ways, it was kind of a better world because having the box was kind of cool and having a shelf full of boxes. I kind of miss those days.
Yeah.
Now you press a button and the game's in your computer. Over our time, the industry went from no competition to being fairly competitive, with going from being 5 to 10 games a year coming out to maybe a couple hundred games a year when we sold the company. Um, and it became a billion-dollar industry, which now is tiny by comparison. But at that time, we were pretty dominant. We had a couple hundred million of revenue back in, when a time when the whole industry was only $1 billion. So once we retired, I don't know if you want to mention anything here, Bert, but we basically we sold the company. We had run it for almost 20 years, and I was kind of burnt out on doing games at the time, I guess you could say. And the company had gotten so big that I was spending all of my time running on airplanes. So we got an offer to buy the company, sold it, and bought a boat and started circumnavigating and actually even bought a home in Mexico where we lived for 15 or so years,
Not all the time, half the year.
half the year,
Yeah.
and a lot of the time on the boat. So meanwhile, the games business kind of exploded. Distribution shifted to being online. We weren't really paying much attention to it. I mean, we were kind of busy being retired, and the market suddenly became large with kind of a AAA title category and indie games. Prices for games came down. Yesterday, Roberta and I were looking at a video for an old ad for Time Zone, a game we did, and it said $99, and you almost never see a $99.
$99.95.
Yeah, you never see that in today's world.
People bought it.
And
They were
pricing
happy.
models back then were pretty simple. I mean, everything was either $39 or $49. It wasn't.
Oh yeah, way more expensive than today. Yeah.
Yeah.
Way.
That also cost money for those boxes. I had like $7 a unit or something in every box before it went out the door. And the business, while we were busy retired, went from a couple hundred games a year to a couple hundred a day. And if you look at Steam and the number of games that go there, it's insane. And the business went big. I mean, I can't even envision. I mean, it's now a $175 billion market. So, and the way games are built. I mean, the barrier to entry. When we sold the company, developing a game really required a company like Sierra Online. They had our own video editors and animation editors and music editors,
And programmers and
programmers.
artists.
Yeah,
and
now
animators.
anybody can do anything.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
well, let's see. And then COVID hit. Do you want to talk about what happened?
Yeah. So you can see by what Ken is telling you that we were very, very busy with Sierra, and Ken was he was busy running the company, which in many ways made him sad because he really is a programmer at heart and wanted to be more close to the game development part of the company, but wasn't really able to too much. Whereas I was lucky in that I could continue to just design games, design many of the adventure games that we had. And I want to stress that's my specialty is adventure games. All those other games that you saw that Sierra developed and distributed. Many of them were not adventure games. Actually, the adventure games were a smaller portion of Sierra, although at the time it was a very profitable portion of Sierra. But anyway, I was able to stay on and just be a game designer, which I loved. But then COVID, then we sold the company, we're retired, we're going around the world on a boat and all that. And then COVID happened. And like everybody, and especially a lot of creative people, we couldn't go anywhere. We couldn't do anything. We were in California at the time and just kind of didn't know what to do with ourselves. And one day we just were out, talking, having our morning coffee, and I noticed. I said to Ken, I said, I noticed you're trying to learn how to program 3D animations, because I would catch him doing it and looking at YouTube videos from Unity. And I said, what are you doing? Are you thinking of writing a game or something? And he said, yeah, yes. And he was thinking about it. And it got me thinking. And later that day, as I was making our lunch, I thought of Colossal Cave because I don't know, just because of this discussion. And I got a little jealous that he's thinking of maybe doing a game. And what am I doing? I'm here making lunch, and I've got my dogs, but sitting around COVID and everything. And for some reason, Colossal Cave popped into my head. And I thought, Ken and I, like we did at the very beginning of Sierra with Mystery House, working together, the two of us, which I loved. It was wonderful. I thought, Colossal Cave, it's already designed, it's game. Many people have played it, millions, and it's a text game, old, but it's got a design. Maybe we could add graphics to it. It kind of took me back to when we started Mystery House, when I thought it was going to be a text game, and then we thought maybe we could put graphics to Mystery House, and we did. And so the wheels started spinning, and I went back to Ken and I said, "What do you think about if we took Colossal Cave and made it 3D graphics and just all the new stuff, and virtual reality or whatever? And what if we just did that, worked on this together?" And he immediately called Don Woods. And I was like, how did you get a hold of Don Woods? Well, he was one of the designers with oh, I forgot.
Adventure.
No.
Oh.
Will Crowther.
Will Crowther.
Jeez, I just zoned out. Yeah, with Will Crowther to design Colossal Cave. How did you get a hold of him? He said, "Well, I have my ways." And but what Ken wanted to know is if it was available for us to do that. And Don Wood said, "Sure, yeah, go ahead." And so we did. Ken and I, we worked on it together, but started working on it. Marcus came in as the famous Marcus Mara there, came in with us at first, the very first person to work with us on the Colossal Cave 3D. And then by the end of it, we had like 35 people all working for us remotely, because still COVID's going on. But it was very interesting to get back into it. Could we even do a game? Could we even think about a game? Or especially in today's world, and were we getting too old and too remote? Hadn't thought about doing games for 25 years. But it for us, it was like riding a bike. It didn't take more than a couple of days, to just get right into it, and we're right back in the zone. It was very surprising, but so much fun. And I'll let Ken talk more about this slide.
Oh, well, I mean, the only other thing to say is that we released it on like 22 platforms. And no matter what you got, if you want to play the game, you can. It was weird getting back into game development after being out of the business that long, but also very familiar, as Roberta said. And anyway, games out there, we did that, and that was kind of a warm up. Now I'm kind of looking into the future and spending a lot of time playing with AI, trying to figure out what comes next and how has it affected game development. And it almost feels like the early days when we were trying to figure out how to program a computer the first time. And I'm aware that a lot of people kind of hate AI, but the analogy I think of is to when we built our house in Mexico, and for the first year, nobody had electricity and everything was being done by hand. And that's kind of how game development was prior to AI. Now suddenly I'm working, trying to get used to how one codes in AI. And it's really weird because you can talk to the computer in English and tell it what you want for graphics, and it just figures it out. And I'm developing something now, and I haven't actually written a line of code. I've just said, well, I see the screen like this, and can you make that brighter? Can you give me, music that does this? And it just kind of does it. So it's a weird new world, and it feels like the industry is kind of starting all over again. Whether or not that means that Roberta and I are actually going to do another game, I haven't the vaguest idea. For right now, I'm still in kind of the learning phase. I feel like a beginner all over again. But anyway, with
Well,
that,
I want to make a comment on that. So one of the things Ken said to me is a while back, maybe a year or so ago, he said to me, he was talking about AI, and we have sort of our differences on AI. I'm not as hot on it, I guess you could say. Ken is more than me, but he came to me once and he said, I went to, I think it was probably Chat GTP at the time. And he said, I asked Chat GTP if we could do like King's Quest 9, what the design would be, what would the story be? And he asked it, and he came back to me and he said, look at this, here, this is what it said. Here's a game design for King's Quest 9, and it just spit it out just like that. And I looked at it and I said, I don't think so. No, no. Uh, and I said, this is not what I would say. This is not what me as a human being and with my own ideas would do. It has to come. It would have to come from me or another person. This and we had our little disagreement on that, but that's where I fall in. Is like, yeah, AI can do a lot to help, but you can't take out the human component and our brains, and our creativity. Then there's just no way. So I just wanted to add that.
that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Marcus, I ran out of slides, so you got any questions? Anybody there?
Testing, testing. Yes, yes, I do have a question. I wanted to ask that moment when Mystery House was designed as a text adventure, what was the spark to make it into a graphic adventure? Was that Roberta's idea, or was that you, Ken, that had tools to make it happen?
I would say it was both, but from two different ways of looking at it. For me, it was just merely creative, as a creative person and a imaginative person. When I played Colossal Cave at the very first one, text game, I always could see in my mind what it looked like, and which is what well-written stories, that you might read a book or whatever, and or even some of these old text games, you come up with the idea of what it looks like in your mind as you're going through it. You imagine it, and so I always had this idea that wouldn't it be interesting if I could create the graphics as might see it in my mind. Could that happen on a computer? Nobody had done that yet. So I really thought it couldn't happen. So that's why originally I thought it would probably be a text game, but I certainly always would wanted that and said to him it would be great. But Ken came at it from a software and programming point of view as to whether it could be done at all, because there was no way that we knew of to put graphics into a computer game, and especially on the Apple II. And at the time, and this was 79, 80, basically the Apple II was the only game in town to utilize to write a computer game. So he came to it with the project of figuring out how to do it. I came to it with the idea of I'd love to do it.
Okay, we're going to turn it over to the audience questions. Go ahead, Jen.
Yeah. So when you guys started, a lot of this was sort of nascent. There weren't well-defined jobs or skill sets or things.
We can't hear it at all. Help, Marcus.
Okay.
See, well, try that.
Is this better? Can you hear me?
Better. Yes.
Yeah.
So when you guys started in the industry, it was very nascent. And today, we have very well-defined jobs for people that work in game design or art direction or all these things. How did you hire people? How did you find the skill sets you needed to staff your company as you were starting out?
How did you find all the people that staff it when?
Yeah, it was weird when we started the company. Computer programmers, as they were known in those days, were focused on business, and nobody in their right mind would take a job developing games. It just wasn't heard of. And who I wound up hiring was like 18-year-old kids who and younger. I remember one of the programmers, I think his name was Rourke, was only 16 and was living with us up in the mountains to develop games. It took a while before game development was actually appreciated as a software career. So yeah, in the beginning, I'd say our staff was mostly young kids who were very precocious and wanted to program computers and were passionate about learning what computers could do. So
Later on, though, we learned to hire a little bit more mature programmers.
yeah,
I will say.
yeah, the early work, even
The young kids were interesting and very, very energetic and lots of ideas at first, but after a while, your business turns into a business.
yeah, the
and
business turned into
yeah, you have to have a little maturity. So
yeah, there's a fun book out there called Hackers that is about the early days of Sierra and the craziness of the birth of the industry. And the guy who wrote the book, Stephen Levy, was a Rolling Stone reporter who thought software should be free. And I'm kind of the villain of the story because I wanted to make money selling software. And
he
wanted
to grow the company.
I wanted to build a company.
We wanted to create more games.
In a world where, Stephen Levy thought, game development was like creating art, and art should be free.
Well, it is kind of art, but yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
anything else? I want to talk about whatever you want to hear, not.
Next question.
Hi, my name is Matthew Flinton, and I want to say I'm a huge.
Uh-oh.
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 I've
Sorry.
been playing them since 1985 on the PC Junior, and the very first Sierra game I ever played was King's Quest. And because I was born with cerebral palsy, I would come home on Friday nights, just dig into your world because I didn't worry about high school and I didn't worry about some of the difficulties. But I did want to say that the reason I went out and bought a VR headset was because you guys made a virtual reality game. And I really, really hope you make another one.
Oh, thank you.
Very-
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was a lot of fun working in VR. I mean, for me, when we sold the company, I had plans for King's Quest to go on in 3D, but we sold the company, and so I couldn't. You might notice with King's Quest 8 Mask of Eternity that it is partly 3D. It was all 3D rendered, but it wasn't 3D in the same way of virtual reality with a headset. You just go through it and the world moves around you. It wasn't like that. It was sort of my first foray into trying to do 3D, but the PCs in those days couldn't handle didn't have the power to handle virtual reality like we like now. So it was a lot of fun for me with the remake of Colossal Cave 3D to work with virtual reality and headsets. You probably saw the picture of me there with my headset on. It was the first time I ever put one on my face. I always call it putting it on my face instead of my head because it just hangs onto my cheekbones and just hurts after a while. But I love it so much. And it was just awesome. And yeah, so I'm glad that you enjoyed the 3D Colossal Cave.
Next question.
That's all I
Next
have
question.
to say.
Hello.
Hello.
So
Oh, there you are.
you guys are well known for your adventure games, but I'm wondering if you dipped your toe into other companies' adventure games like LucasArts, and if you have a favorite game from those other studios that also did those same genres.
I played them, and I played them for a couple of reasons. One was I love playing adventure games, and just enjoyed playing them for myself. Because I mean, just because I create my own doesn't mean that I don't want to play others. But I also played them in order to see what they were doing. And if you're going to be developing one of your own, and especially back then, probably still true, you have to keep up with the times, and you have to see what your competitors are doing, and can you do better? And how could you change it? What could you do differently? So, I mean, that was my experience back then, and yeah, I mean, I played most of them, LucasArts especially. Although interestingly, I never played Monkey Island. I don't know why. I really don't know why.
You go back, play it.
Maybe I should.
Hello. Can you hear me okay?
Hi.
Hi. I just want to say thank you both for taking the time to do this. I was probably too young to grow up with the King's Quest series, except for King's Quest Mask of Eternity, which you mentioned briefly. I love that game. I still go back to it every few years. It was a big part of my childhood. And I was just wondering if you could just talk a little bit
Thank
about
you.
the development of King's Quest 8.
Well, do you want to start
Which game?
King's Quest 8? Okay. Well, King's Quest 8 was the eighth one that I did, and the problem with King's Quest 8, maybe both the problem and the good part is we were just as I started thinking about it and what the game was going to be about and how we were going to do it and how we were going to do any new tricks, new modernization. I was thinking 3D and how we could do things like that. We sold the company, and that put everything in kind of a quandary. The company became very kind of mixed up, and pieces and parts of it kind of broke off and went somewhere else. And it was a very difficult time for the development of King's Quest 8. I had my team. The team was put together, and some of them were team members from prior King's Quest, and some of them were brand new. And Ken stayed on for a while after we sold the company, and he went on to other things. I stayed because I was determined that I was going to get it done. I was not happy. Ken has his book that he wrote. What is it again? It's such a long title.
Not all fairy tales
Not all
have
happy
endings.
endings.
Yeah.
And King's Quest 8 fell into that pit almost, I would say. And there was a lot of sadness and excitement and everything mixed with it, because I knew it was the end, and it was the end for me. And the team and I didn't always agree on how we should go with it. And so I would do some things to design it, and then I would see that it was undone. And new things popped in, and that I would see it and go, what is this? And it was back and forth and back and forth. And it was, I I love Mask of Eternity. I really thought that the story element of it was really cool, and it was different from a lot of the prior King's Quest. Some people say that it didn't follow with the Daventry story and King Graham and all that as much. I think maybe I was in the time period where I wanted to experiment not only with 3D, but put some other new gaming elements in, and the storyline to be a little more not fairy tale, but maybe a little more spiritual almost, and high fantasy a little bit more. But anyway, we got through it. We got it out, and I really loved it. I know it's had a little bumpy time out there, but I'm really happy to hear that you really loved it and it was part of your childhood, and you still want to go back and play it. I'm very happy to hear that. That's it.
Who's next?
Hello, testing. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I hear you.
Yeah, we hear you.
All right. So I know back in the 90s, there was a big trend of a lot of games using full motion video. I know you did, you had a game Phantasmagoria, which used the full motion video. I remember it was on I think it was 9 different CDs, right? So
7.
7. All right. All right. And with the current technology right now, and with gaming being much more big budget now, there's a lot more resources. Do you see that coming back? You know, companies, AAA companies, making use of these full motion video with higher quality, and would that be something that you would want to incorporate in any future potential games that you create?
Well, I have to say that Phantasmagoria was the most fun project I ever did. I loved it. It was like a 4-year project for me, from just the inkling of the idea, and and following through with that, writing the story, getting it down, figuring out how to make a game out of it, making the decision to have actors. And the reason I decided on actors versus just computer animation, which we could have done very easily at the time, it would have been easier for us had we done it like that. But because Phantasmagoria was a horror game, and I'm very dedicated to what I become dedicated to, and if I become dedicated to a game and or anything really, like and I say, well, it's going to be a horror game, that means it's got to be a horror game, and I don't play around. And got me into some trouble here and there, and a little controversial and things like that. But okay, it did really, really well. But and I loved it. But I said I wanted actors because being horror, and I wanted to see if a computer game could scare people. It was like an experiment almost, and playing with emotions. And in order to scare people, I believed there's no computer animation in the world that you're going to really empathize with to the point that you would become emotional and really look up, oh my God, like that. I just didn't see that happening unless you have a human person there, because we automatically, as humans, we perceive other humans' emotions, fear, love, whatever it is, you perceive it and you can feel it yourself. And so I said, there's no way that a computer is going to scare anybody, or that they're really going to get really into the horror of this without a human. And that's when I just said, we have to have actors. And especially the main character, Adrienne, the actress was wonderful. And she really came through with the emotions. As far as the way we had to do it was very difficult and time consuming. We did it with 3D renders. So we rendered the entire what you would call set, which is the graphics of the game in 3D. The whole game was rendered at the time in high res, beautiful renderings, which we had to lower the quality to when you put them on, when you programmed it, put it on the CDs, the quality of the resolution had to be lowered because the computers just couldn't handle it. But originally were rendered in very high resolution 3D, and they were beautiful. But we had to put the actors into the the 3D rendered world, and that was very difficult. We had to, nowadays they call it green screening, but we used blue screening, and everything the actors did was acting against blue screen. They were never ever in what you see as the graphics in that game. We tried our best to make it look like it. I think we did a pretty good job, especially for back then. This would have been like 96 or 95, maybe 90, not 94, 95-ish. So I think we did a pretty good job, but it was very time consuming. I was in this, we in fact, Sierra, we created a whole studio in Oakhurst, California, where we were at the time, just to do this game. And I think we were thinking that if this worked out, we would do more of them. But then we sold the company, and then we moved to Seattle, and the whole thing that a lot of people know. So we never did that. We did Phantasmagoria 2, but we did it differently. That one we actually did with full video, just camera only, actors in a real place. It was a real set. They weren't put in any 3D rendered images or world at all. And it was shot and created a little differently from the design standpoint, in that with my characters on Phantasmagoria, the very first one, I wanted it to play like an adventure game. I really, really, really tried very hard to keep it where adventure game players could feel like they really are playing an adventure game. And I had to tell we had actually a Hollywood director there directing the actors, because I'm not a director, although I got involved a lot. And I kept reminding him, this is a game. This is a game. This is a game. This is a game. But when we did Phantasmagoria 2, I think they got a little bit more into the movie-like aspect of it, which I was really trying to avoid. So, but
I'm going
they're
to
two
stop you
different.
there, Roberta, because we have a few more questions to
Okay.
to get in, and we're running out of time.
Well, that was as one of my favorite subjects is Phantasmagoria, so I'm sorry.
Clearly.
I didn't mean to take over.
You're a combo, you're an artist and an engineer, and sometimes that communication can be, a little different in communication styles. What was maybe a challenge that you had to come up with communicating a visual arts to an engineering team? And why do you think you were so successful at it?
Say this again.
What was
I
your
heard you,
communication? I'm sorry. What was the communication like between an artist and an engineering team? And why do you think you all were so successful at that?
I think because I'm a creative person, designer. And Ken is the engineer. So I think just being married to an engineer and he's married to a creative person, we have figured out how to do that, I guess. It's just organic.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would add to that is that I gave a lot of power to the designer of the game, who became kind of a dictator and forced a vision with programming and with art and everything and with music so that it had a unified feel to it and that everybody was kind of on the same page. And that was kind of the biggest thing I did, was just keep the pressure on to make sure that the vision of the game that was in the designer's mind was what the artists, the musicians, everybody on the same page pointed one direction. But I think you got a second question too, and I want to make sure that we cover everything. No?
You're good. Next.
Up front. Hi, Ken. Hi, Roberta. You talked a lot about the beginnings of online systems with Mystery House and whatnot, but you also released two other games with it back in 1980, Trap Shoot and Skeet Shoot, which we almost know nothing about. So I'm wondering if you could just tell us why those games, they were very different from Mystery House, and who is the Keith that created them?
What was the question?
Who was it? Why? What was the thinking about Trap Shoot and Skeet Shoot back there in the beginning?
Oh.
Whose inspiration and how did that happen? That was you.
The truth is at the beginning, there was no strategy. It was really what I could find. The market was so hungry for content that if I could find a game and it would even light up the screen, I could sell a ton of it. I mean, there was just nothing. There was no, people were buying these $2,000 computers and even $2,500 and $3,000 at the time. And there was nothing to run on them. So, I was entrepreneurial, for lack of a better word, and wanted things to sell. And one of the kids, people started sending me games in the mail. And if the game looked good quality and fun to play, I released it. I mean, later we got kind of, I wouldn't say bureaucratic, but we suddenly had kind of a vision and we knew where we were going. But at the beginning, and especially with Skeet Shoot and Trap Shoot, I think those were programmed by a guy I worked with when we were doing compiler development for accounting systems. We did something that was kind of a precursor to modern spreadsheets that was doing tax returns for a company like General Motors. But one of the programmers on that project sent me those games and I thought they looked great and I released them. So.
Oh, that really, I'm actually was curious about it myself when you asked the question. So
now we're
I didn't remember that, but
yeah.
Okay.
I think it was Keith Wild, but I'm not 100% sure. Well, and another guy I worked with wrote Crossfire, which was a really good early action game. So, so we had some actually, I mean, I can't say that they were brilliant strategy, but it certainly worked out and the games are fun.
We actually got a lot of demos back in the day, that people would send us. What do you think of this game? Or, kind of almost like early Steam. Now everybody, they work on their games and they put it in there, and I hope, that people will play them. And so we got a lot of demos from people too, which
wasn't soft porn one of them? Soft porn.
Yes, yes, it was, and it was a text game and I played it. I was the person at the time. Ken would give me these games, and he would say, "I want you to play it and tell me what you think. Whether this game should we do this one or that one or." And it was just us at the time. And I played it, the text version. And I said to Ken, this is actually a really good game. I mean, it was text. Thank goodness, I guess, because of its subject matter to a certain extent, but it was a good game. It was very well developed and designed. And probably many people know now that game turned out to become Leisure Suit Larry in the land of the lounge lizards.
Probably the most recognizable game we ever did.
We had Allo, the famous designer, do it, and he was the perfect person for it.
Hi, Ken and Roberta. My question is, when you were designing these games, these adventure puzzle games, long before the internet existed, players didn't have access to magazines, Reddit, YouTube walkthroughs. How did you determine if the puzzles were fair or unfair? And did that constraint of players not having access to information make it the puzzles easier for you to design?
Well, I'm going to break this into two different parts, one on my side and then one on Ken's. For me, obviously at the very beginning, I had no idea what I was doing. I just sat down and did. Um, and so with Mystery House, Wizard and the Princess, then I did a kind of a dumb game called Mission Asteroid, like Mission Impossible, but Mission Asteroid, and a few games like that, and I really didn't know what I was doing. I just kind of did. But as time went on, I realized that that I needed to. Well, time zone is what really, for me, created what you're talking about. This issue that maybe some of the puzzles are unfair or too hard, or on the other hand, they might be too easy, and I'm just getting through the game too fast. That kind of thing. And time zone was a huge game, and I went overboard, like way overboard, designing the thing. It was huge for at the time, very complex, and hard. It's just hard, and I learned a lot that I need to be more, cognizant of what, how fair or unfair puzzles should be and how they should fit in better. And just by people telling me, you know, right, fans, and we get lots of letters. There wasn't social media back then, and so as I went on to do it, I learned, I guess you'd say. But for Ken, it's how we dealt with at the very beginning with people's questions when they would get stuck in a game, what we did.
Oh, we did a lot in those days. We did a 900 line where people could call and get hints, and it was automated. We had a automated BBS. We did hint books. So we actually generated revenue from making puzzles too hard, and people had to find hints.
No,
and
no,
charge
no,
for
but
that.
I don't want you to say it
Well,
like that. No, no,
It
no,
wasn't really a profit center,
no, not at all.
but it was clear. We did actually things where we released invisible ink books with little pens to reveal the
Well, and we
answers.
wrote hint books.
Yeah.
I mean, I wrote some of them for King's Quest. I don't know if I did it for Colonel's Bequest. But I started writing some of the first hint books, and then we passed it on to others. But so that's to answer the question in both ways.
Anything else? Or are we out of time?
No,
Marcus?
we still have time, so we have a bunch of other questions. It's up to you guys if you want to stop.
No, they're,
Well, we're here. We're,
Don't
we're,
have
We're
any-
here.
we're having fun.
we're here.
We just don't want to bore anybody.
Hi. So you mentioned two things. One was physical copies of games that we don't have much anymore, and I just wanted to say really quick. I already mentioned to Marcus, Colossal Cave is the only physical game I own for my Switch, and it's in there all the time. Now,
Oh, thank you.
and you also mentioned how Text Adventures, it was your imagination that created the graphics for each person playing it. So now when you redid Colossal Caves now in 3D, was that your vision of what it looked like to you, or was that like a team effort on coming up with what it would look like?
Way to steal my closing question there, Anthony.
What? Do I
I
answer?
said, wait, you
Somebody
stole my
else
closing
said-
question.
Sorry.
Oh, should I answer it?
He's
Oh, I
asking
saw
his
your
Colossal
question.
Cave,
Got
this
it.
3D version, your vision, like your
Yeah, no, I
imagination.
got the
I,
question.
I want to give an answer on that one too.
Okay, we'll split that too. So yeah, I mean, for every game I ever worked on, and granted, I had a whole lot more to work on to try to create, or not. I didn't create the graphics, but to think about what they would look like. There was a lot more to work with, and therefore it was a lot more fun for me, but also more difficult because I had more choices of how to make it look. In the old days, but anyway, yeah, I always had to look and make sure I was happy with the look of the graphics. And as the computers were older, Apple IIs, you could only go so far to make them, they I would have much preferred that they look more like Disney. But in the early days, with the low res, and even though we called it high res, but pixels, there's only so much you can do. But with Colossal Cave, yeah, absolutely. And I had to work with we did various iterations of the look of the game to see which one was best, and eventually arrived at the look. And obviously, I had to bless it, which I did. And we finally, but it wasn't that easy, actually, though.
Hey, there was a kind of a cool moment when Will Crowther himself, the original text adventure, was
I
done
can't
by
believe I forgot his name.
Will Crowther and Don Woods, and Crowther was a scientist, a real life scientist in those days, and he's older than me, which makes it fairly old.
He's 80. Last 2 years ago, he was 88.
Yeah, his dog wrote me and sent me pictures of him playing the game on a VR headset, and him commenting on things that we got wrong. Like in the opening scene, he was saying that we put the stream on the wrong side.
Put the stream on the wrong side of the
Yeah.
little building.
It's kind of a fanboy, I guess you'd say, being able to talk to somebody who is a founder of the industry. It's pretty cool.
I have to say that speaking of Will Crowther, I get a lot of people that, over the years, many years, and some of the fanfares and the things, or like the vintage. What is
Vintage Computer Festival?
Vintage Computer Festival.
VCF.
I hear from a lot of people that played my games, and they say, "Oh, you were my childhood," and I say, "I've already heard a couple of those now," and and that a lot of social media and everything that said, I am now in the computer game industry because of you, and you were my inspiration and all that, which I love to hear so much. But Will Crowther was mine. He was my inspiration and honestly my hero for me, because I would not be here. I would be here, but not, doing what I did. I don't know what I would have done. But Sierra Online wouldn't have existed. Adventure games probably would be around. Somebody would have done it. But the reason for doing Colossal Cave 3D was because my homage to Will Crowther. For me, it was an honor to do.
Okay, back to you, Marcus. Did Marcus leave?
No, I'm here.
Oh, there's somebody. Hi.
Hi. Can you talk a little bit about what it was like to test, especially the early games in the Apple II era? And then also, do you ever have an inclination to add Easter eggs to your games?
What was the second part of the question?
Add Easter eggs to your games.
What was it like to test the products and add Easter eggs?
Test the products in
test the products in what way?
Like when you took out my name from the game when I put that Marcus was here.
Oh, I know. No, well, that's not testing the product. That's
You found it testing the game.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I go back and forth on Easter eggs. I've never been a fan of them. But although I know that players love them, so you might want to ask, well, why am I not a fan of them? It kind of goes back to a certain amount of control. Back in the Sierra days, we had a lot of people working on the games, and we had programmers, we had artists, and animators, we had all kinds. We had QA people, and everybody wanted to get something into it. And I would, when I was testing and QAing my games before we shipped them, I would run into these things. I go, what is this? Put this in, And I would go, what? You know, and some of them weren't very nice. You know, some of them were not that nice. And I would say, no, 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 you know, we can't have that, because sometimes what might get put into the game could really offend some people too. So it was difficult I understood the appeal, but I just really always kind of said no, you know, not in my games, and just kind of, even with Colossal Cave 3D, Marcus still stuck to it.
Okay. Hi, Ken and Roberta.
Hi.
Hi, I like your shirt.
Thank
Very
you.
cool.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, I'm here with Marcus at our table here, and you have mentioned that there might be a teletype in the building, and there definitely is. We have one at the table playing Colossal Cave, and
Ooh.
we also have some other things there. So we're really close. And Roberta, you talked about closing some loops with Will Crowder. So we're closing a bunch of loops there. We have Colossal Cave on the teletype, and you can play it in 3D with the VR headset. We also have an Apple III playing Mystery House, and
Wow.
we've built a program that emulates the Versa writer, and we've
Uh-huh.
pulled out all the graphics from Mystery House. There's 95 graphics guys in that game, right? So, and they all fit on this disc. And so it really was an innovation. I mean, a major innovation, right?
Yeah.
That you went from text to all these graphics. And so, just to kind of get to a technical question here, first, in developing that demo, which you guys should all come over and try the Versa Writer. In developing that demo, I found that the export of that did not come out in like vector graphics or any kind of drawing commands. It comes out, let's just, for lack of keeping it simple, call it a bitmap. Okay, it's a proprietary format. So I wonder, Ken, did you come up with the idea of using and storing vector graphics or any kind of drawing commands? And also, if I can add on to that, because it's a technical audience, right away with Mystery House, there was an engine behind it, right? And at the very minimum, there was a division of labor between the two of you. But I'm curious, what your thought process was there, because there's just so much innovation right from the start with a game engine, with the graphic storage, and so on. So could you just share some of that with us?
You go with this.
Yeah. Well, first off, vector graphics. I didn't know that word at the time. I'd never heard of it, and I don't know if anybody had ever done vector graphics before. I think I may have pioneered it. I really don't know. Um, but yet, it is indeed what I had to do in order to fit all the 95 pictures on a floppy that was also sharing with the operating system. So, so yeah, we did that. And there was a second part of the question. I'm trying to remember what it was. The
Just a little bit more detail about the fact that you built a game engine right from the beginning. What
Oh,
was
right.
Oh
the
yeah,
impetus to
and
that?
you know, there truth on that is a little embarrassing in that I was working at the time on a Fortran compiler. Gates had done BASIC, and I thought,
And
well,
DOS
BASIC is kind of a crappy language. Fortran is a way better language. So I was working on a Fortran compiler
for the
and
Apple II.
for the Apple II, and Roberta wanted me to work on her game. And I really didn't kind of want to work on the game. I wanted to, because I considered it silly.
He wanted to be Bill Gates.
Yeah, I wanted to be Bill Gates at the time.
And Bill Gates wouldn't work on a
And he
game.
was making money with his BASIC compiler. So I was going to better him. And so instead of programming her game, I created a system for preparing a game. And that way it was fairly, fill in the blanks. What is the room? What is the puzzle? What is the graphic? And I document it in my book. But it made it easy so that all I had to do was spend a few days programming and then turn it over to her, and she could, in effect, code the game. And that became kind of a mantra at Sierra. I was producing tools for creative people to be able to build the games without an engineer, to bring the designer closer to the game development process. And I thought that meant a better game. Plus, it allowed me to work on real code while she
Well,
was building
so
games.
yeah, and I remember doing that not only with the graphics these wonderful graphics that I drew, but the parser. It was a parser game, meaning that you, just like with the original Colossal Cave, you type in 1 or 2 word commands and into the game, and it would respond and do whatever you want it to do. I developed the parser language system based upon the part of the engine that he put into it, the software, to enable me to be able to do that. So it was kind of like simple programming, but real simple. But
Well, it was non-procedural. I'd been programming in a language called RPG at one point in my career. And for those that programmed in that goofy language, it was more like a fill in the blanks or spreadsheet-based language.
yeah,
But
kind of like that.
It worked.
Yeah.
So
Everybody, let's give
Marcus
them a
is
round of
looking at me.
applause.
Oh, we must be out of time. Good.
That's
Well,
good.
And join me in a chant. One more game. One more game. One more game.
no, we'll
One
live
more
vicariously
game.
through Marcus. He's doing Mystery House.
Yeah, I hope.
Well, thank you.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well,
so
you never know. You never know. You never know.
Never say never, right?
Yes, that's right.
Well, thank you, everybody. This has been fun.
Thank you.
So
And,
that-
join us at the Mystery House table. Yep. One more round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right.
You guys are
Okay.
awesome. We love you
Yeah.
all.
Okay.
Bye.
Love you too. Bye.